Imagine being struck by a devastating attack right in the heart of your most critical infrastructure, and nobody claims it. No demands, no manifestos, just silence. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly chilling geopolitical mystery, an attack that struck the energy lifeline of the most populous Arab state, yet flatly refused to sign its name. We're looking at a targeted strike with massive implications for global trade, for energy security, and for the very concept of neutrality in modern conflict. We are going to break down not just what happened, but why the absolute silence surrounding this incident might actually be its most dangerous weapon.
The clock reads 14:20 GMT on a regular Wednesday afternoon, July 29, 2026. We are at the Egyptian port of Damietta, sitting right there on the Mediterranean edge of the Nile Delta. The flat afternoon calm is violently shattered when something crosses the water and strikes a massive floating gas facility. In an instant, this marks the first direct attack on Egyptian soil since the wider regional US-Iran war kicked off back in February.
So, what exactly got hit in the chaos? The primary target was the Energos Winter. This is a United States-owned vessel flying the Marshall Islands flag, and it was on a 5-year charter to Egypt's state gas company. The strike slammed into the starboard side, and a sudden violent fire spread to a second ship right alongside it, the Greek-operated GasLog Salem. Now, thankfully, and honestly, miraculously, firefighting teams managed to evacuate the crews and wrestle the blaze under control with 0 fatalities. But make no mistake, the structural damage was definitely done.
Now, to really grasp why this matters, we have to look closely at the machine itself, because the hardware explains why this was a highly strategic target. The Energos Winter isn't just some transport ship, it's an FSRU, a floating storage and regasification unit. Think of it as the literal front door to a national power station. It takes liquefied natural gas that arrives at a bone-chilling minus 162 degrees Celsius, warms it back into a gas, and injects it straight into Egypt's domestic power grid.
And when you break down the numbers, the sheer scale of this vessel's value is staggering. We are talking about 450 million cubic feet of gas pumping through it every single day. To put that into perspective, that's roughly 7% of Egypt's entire daily gas consumption, and it represents about 16% of the country's total liquefied natural gas regasification capacity. Knocking this out, that is a surgical strike against a nation's ability to keep the lights on.
And Egypt's recent economic story makes this even more critical. They used to be a major gas exporter, aiming to be this grand Eastern Mediterranean gas hub, but domestic output sagged while demand just kept climbing sharply. By late 2024, Egypt transitioned into a net importer. In 2025 alone, they brought in a record 8.92 million tons of LNG. That means a single import facility at Damietta is carrying in an unusually heavy, highly critical load for the whole country.
Dealing with this strike was an absolute nightmare. Sources indicated that a storage tank aboard the Energos Winter was actually breached. We aren't talking about a superficial dent here. It required a grueling 14-hour firefighting operation. The ship literally had to rapidly pump the remaining gas it was holding into the domestic network before it could even be safely towed offshore for what's going to be a very lengthy repair.
But here is where the story gets really fascinating: the immediate aftermath and Cairo's public response. Notice the 14-hour contradiction here. On Wednesday evening, officials are flatly rejecting reports of a drone strike, telling everyone it's just a fire, maybe an engine room incident. But fast forward to Thursday morning, and the Egyptian cabinet completely flips the script. They officially state that preliminary investigations point definitively to an aerial attack by a drone. That 14-hour gap, that bought Cairo crucial time to figure out exactly what this incident meant before locking themselves into a corner globally.
And they moved incredibly fast from that initial denial to securing hard evidence. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli stepped up and announced that technical teams had boarded the ship. Suddenly, security agencies were in a laboratory analyzing the physical, scorched remains of a drone airframe. Cairo was no longer dealing with rumors on the wind. They were literally holding the fragments of the weapon that had pierced their sovereign territory.
So, we have the weapon, but who fired it? Welcome to the attribution vacuum. In a region totally saturated with militant groups that usually race to publicize their operations on social media within minutes, absolutely no one officially took credit. The attack arrived, did its massive damage, and left no signature whatsoever. Let's break down the public stances here, because the silence is deafening.
First up, the Houthi movement in Yemen. They explicitly and immediately threw their hands up and distanced themselves from the attack. Through their affiliated Saba news agency, they stated plainly that there was no truth to the rumors that they had targeted a vessel at the Egyptian port. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with this one. Next, we look at Iran. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was incredibly quick to pivot away from any responsibility. He took to the podium to frame Egypt as an important friend and partner, emphasizing that Cairo's security was paramount to Tehran. And then, he pointed the finger squarely at Israel, warning the region against what he termed Israeli false flag operations. Meanwhile, the United States pointed in the complete opposite direction. President Donald Trump claimed the explosion was Iran-related, though crucially, Washington released no official proof. Yet, at the exact same time, you've got unnamed sources described as Iranian whispering to the New York Times that it actually was an Iranian drone, meant as a warning to show how global shipping could be disrupted. But again, no government stepped up to officially confirm this. The confusion reaches the absolute highest levels of intelligence. Even top-tier security experts are completely split on who pulled the trigger. Hani Al-Assar points to the Houthis. Professor Brenda Schaffer attributes it to Iran trying to manipulate global oil prices. Eli Reddick views it as a symbolic strike, while other analysts note that, geographically speaking, groups in Iraq or Lebanon are perfectly capable of making the shot. 4 credible experts, 4 totally different answers. The publicly available evidence just does not settle this mystery.
While the world debated the who, Egypt had to deal with the what now. How did they actually survive the hit? Well, they didn't black out, but the margin got dangerously thin. To keep the lights on right at the peak of the sweltering Egyptian summer, they had to string together some highly expensive alternatives. They scrambled to utilize other regasification units, started burning dirtier fuel oil and diesel, tapped a standby vessel all the way over in Jordan, and eventually had to make temporary cuts to heavy industrial users. Every single one of these options bled money and ate up precious spare capacity.
But let's zoom out for a second, because this attack wasn't just about Egypt's electricity. Damietta sits right next door to the Suez Canal and the SUMED pipeline. With the Red Sea already heavily contested, this Mediterranean corridor has been leaned on as a vital, safe route for global crude. The SUMED pipeline alone has a capacity of around 2.5 million barrels a day. That is a massive global artery.
The panic was pretty much instant. Analysts like MST Marquee warned that risk to this specific passage threatens up to 5 million barrels a day of supply. Intelligence firms like Dryad Global and Argus predicted a substantial, immediate increase in war risk insurance premiums for literally any vessel traversing the canal. The entire maritime industry braced for a massive global economic shock.
But then, the market did something totally unexpected. Oil prices on Thursday actually dipped. The financial world didn't panic over Damietta. Why? Because traders were hyper-focused on completely different geopolitical talks happening between Iran and Oman over the Strait of Hormuz. The immediate financial catastrophe everyone predicted simply didn't register on the trading floor.
But honestly, do not let that price dip for you. The invisible structural damage was absolutely done. Because here is the hard truth. Insurance does not require attribution to reprice. A single unclaimed drone delivered against a port taught every single maritime underwriter that day that this supposedly safe corridor is actually only conditionally safe. And that harsh lesson is going to survive long after the fire on the Energos Winter is put out. And this brings us to a really chilling geopolitical takeaway. Egypt is not a belligerent in this US-Iran war that kicked off in early 2026. Cairo maintained working relationships with both Washington and Tehran, constantly urging de-escalation. They sat the war out, yet their critical infrastructure was struck anyway. Neutrality, in this specific instance, completely stopped functioning as a shield.
Which leaves us with a critical, ongoing debate over intention. Was the drone aiming purely at American commercial interests, the US-owned Energos Winter, essentially shooting past Cairo to hit Washington's wallet? Or was the fact that this asset was plugged directly into Egyptian state infrastructure the entire point of the message? Both of these readings are being fiercely argued right now, and frankly, both have terrifying implications for non-belligerent states worldwide.
This leads us to what might be the darkest conclusion of all. What if the total lack of a claim wasn't a mistake? What if it was the entire strategy? Deniability is arguably the most valuable payload a weapon can carry in this kind of shadow war. Think about it. There is no address to send an angry diplomatic demarche. There is no flag to launch a retaliatory military strike against. It even gives Egypt breathing room to delay making impossible political decisions. For whoever launched it, the silence wasn't a failure. It was a brilliantly calculated strategy. And that leaves us with this final, profoundly unsettling thought to ponder as the ashes settle in Damietta. If a highly destructive attack carries no flag and absolutely nobody claims it, what on earth is a non-belligerent state supposed to do next?
Who do you hold accountable when the weapon has zero signature? It's a massive question, and until it's answered, every single port on the Mediterranean has a very nervous calculus to run. Thanks for diving into this explainer with us. Keep asking the hard questions, and we'll catch you next time.